Hey guys, so let's go ahead and get started. Today we are going to start a little bit of poetry. This is poetry from the early American time period, which is pretty rare, and it is by an author named Anne Bradstreet, also rare because she was a lady. Let's go ahead and get our journal entry, and then we will read. Here follows some verses upon the burning of our house, July 10th, 1666. So, in your journal, I want you to pause here and take 10 to 15 minutes to write this out. Have you ever thought about what you value most? Some people especially prize a particular possession. Others may value an idea or a feeling instead of a possession. So, what do you value most? Tell me your ideas. Make sure you're writing in complete sentences. Go ahead and pause here, and then you can pick back up this video in about 10 to 15 minutes after you're done. All right, here we go. So again, we are starting poetry. Poetry is language arranged in lines. It is useful to recreate the emotions and experiences for the audience. So it lets us know how the author feels. It opens us up to new experiences and emotions because of the way that it's written. Poems are often arranged in small groups of lines called stanzas. They can be any length or size. Other common features of poems are the use of meter, which are patterns of syllabic stress, rhyme, similar sounds at the ends of words, and sounds of words, and figurative language, which is, not literal language. In poetry, meaning is conveyed using form or the way words are arranged on the page and content. So the way that we shape the poems give us meaning, and also the things that we say in a poem give us meaning. All right. So this poem here follows some verses. Upon the burning of our house, July 10th, 1666. Wow, that is a mouthful. We're going to say upon the burning of our house. Relates the speaker's feelings about losing a home and belongings. Over the course of the poem, we see her distinctive voice, and our voice refers to their use of language, this author's particular use of language, the way that they say things. That's their voice. So it helps us see their feelings, attitudes, and personality. And I think Anne Bradstreet has a pretty clear personality in everything that she writes. So, to determine her voice, we'll think about three things: her diction, what words did she choose, and what images stand out; her tone, what is her attitude on the subject; and the structure that she writes with. How long are the lines and stanzas, and how does this impact her meaning? To keep track of how her voice changes, look for words and phrases that indicate a shift in tone in the poem, words that might suggest like a contrast. So we want to see if she like maybe shifts the way she feels or changes her mind within this poem, which is something that happens here. So think about how the voice can help you identify her purpose for writing, and think about this: what feelings and beliefs is she sharing? She's got strong beliefs, and there's a shift in the way she feels. So you can look out for those things. Words can help express emotions. In this poem, a shift in word choice helps express a shift in how she's dealing with the loss of her home. In line 22, she'll use the phrase, my sorrowing eyes, but then in line 51, she's going to contrast with, there's wealth enough. So she's going through like all of the stages of grief as she is writing this out. Consider that she may have more than one purpose in her writing. So, what's the purpose for herself, and what message might she want to give to the reader? In this case, Anne Bradstreet is deeply religious, as were everybody else in this time period. So, there's going to be a lot of that religion bleeding forth. And I think that she wants to spread her sort of deep religious feelings with her reader. When you paraphrase a text, you restate it in your own words, making sure to maintain the meaning in order of the writer's ideas. So to paraphrase a poem, you would restate each line or sentence in a clear, simple prose. Paraphrasing can be especially helpful when you want to clarify the meaning of a difficult section in the poem. So in this case, she uses an inverted syntax or a structure in which the expected order is reversed. So paraphrasing can ensure that you understand it. So this is a good practice to do whenever you're like not sure what's going on in a poem. Writing out kind of what you think that they're saying in each line really helps. Here is an example of a paraphrase of the first stanza of her poem. So take a look at this. I'm not going to read it out to you. It's in your slideshow. All right, allusions. And we've talked about allusions before. Allusion is any sort of reference to any other work. So it could be a reference to a place, a person, an event that happens, or another literary work. Often in writing, we see a lot of biblical references, especially at this time period. They're almost always going to be biblical in nature. So this is going to be no, different. So the thing about allusion is they assume that you know what this is, and then it'll call to mind other ideas, stories, or insights that you may have about that thing that they're referring to. So it helps your previously conceived perceptions expand the meaning of this work. So we will see things to stories about the Bible like the Garden of Eden or David and Goliath, things that you would probably know. And her reader would know the Bible super well, so they're going to recognize all these allusions super well. In this poem, the phrase all's vanity will allude to the book Ecclesiastes in the Bible, which describes what we value as meaningless and will vanish. So like they think that vanity, at this time the Puritans thought that vanity, or like thinking that the objects in that you have in your life, or the way that you look, or the way that you dress, that's not important. There are also references to the book of Job, in which a man suffers many losses, but he stays faithful to God, and to the creation story in the book of Genesis. And by comparing all these events in the poem to biblical stories, she's giving her readers insight into the nature of her loss and her recovery. As you read, you might notice how the allusions contribute to the meaning of the poem. So you'll recognize them more if you recognize these Bible stories. But just knowing that Job was a man who suffered many losses will help. The creation story, I think you'll probably recognize. And thinking about how like vanity is not supposed to be important will help you understand. So this is Anne Bradstreet. This is a sketch of her. She was born in England and raised on an estate, so she was, reasonably wealthy. Her father managed this estate for an earl, and she had access to that earl's library, and she received a very good education, which is not necessarily the norm for every woman, but it was for her because she was reasonably wealthy. In 1628, she married a man named Simon Bradstreet, and they moved to Massachusetts, so they went to the colonies. She was not like really prepared for living in colonial America because there was nothing. I mean, there was empty land besides what the natives lived on. And so they were just like building these huts to live in, and it was really, really hard. Her religious faith and her writing helped her endure these hardships. So she wrote a lot, and we have a lot of poetry of hers from this time period. Her poetry focuses primarily on the realities of her life. So her husband, her children, her house. She had 8 kids. Oh my goodness. But that was pretty normal back then. In 1650, her brother-in-law had some of her verses published in London. And this is the first book of poetry ever published by an American colonist. This particular poem, of course, is about the destruction of her house, as she expresses how sad she is that she lost it. All right, words that may be unfamiliar to. His architect. So there's blah, 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 blah. His is the first part of that. Architect is the last part of that. When we are talking about this sentence, we're talking about how like the word his is capitalized and architect here is capitalized because they're referring to God. So anytime God is mentioned, you'll see that they mean God as in like their specific God, this one dude. It's always going to have a capital letter because like that's his name, and any references to him will also be capitalized. Unlike if you were looking at like Greek writing where they refer to like Zeus in capital letter, but in the gods in lowercase because there's many of them. All right. Air is actually just a contraction. It's kind of an old way to say ever. They would say air. Thy is an archaic way of saying your, and thou is an archaic way of saying you. All right. So to complete today, you have your journal entry, and then you have Upon the Burning of Our House, which is a Canvas quiz. It's pretty easy. So you'll go and you'll read the poem, and then you'll complete Upon the Burning of Our House. Good luck, guys. Hope you enjoy it.